Hi, folks. I'm Father Joe Grimaldi. You can call me Joe, and I'd like to welcome you to my podcast. But now, here's our host and friend, Ken Calvert.
Hello again, everybody. Hey, that was my Keith Jackson. I'll do that for you again. Play-by-play announcer. Whoa, Nelly, who wants it? Who's number one? He goes 305, and he's a corn-fed horse out of Iowa, and he can flat out knock some people on their fannies. Hi, everybody, I'm Keith Jackson, and welcome to the big house.
What an introduction.
That's it. That's my Keith Jackson. So
that's terrific,
thank
really.
you so much. So I got to go back to normal now. Because
what is normal?
Hi, everybody. I'm Ken Calvert. The Father Joe Grimaldi podcast is being supported by our great friends at Hoot McInerney Star Lincoln 12 Mile and Telegraph in Southfield. The family, along with the entire staff, once again want to thank you. They've been serving our community for over 50 years with another 50 to come. That's why so many of their customers come back, second time, third time. Guys like me on their fourth Star Lincoln SUV. Star would like to thank you for one of their best months ever. And it's easy because they've got a great lineup of sedans and SUVs, and you have to stop by, say hi, have a cup of coffee, and take a look at that 2020 Lincoln Aviator. If you're not blown away, friends, I can't help you. Star Lincoln 12 Mile and Telegraph. You can shop online at starlincoln.com. Highly recommend you do that. Hoot McInerney Star Lincoln, 12 Mile Road and Telegraph in Southfield, the home of the Father Joe Grimaldi Star Treatment. Well, we were just looking at television, and in the background, we noticed that the funeral mass for Lee Iacocca was going on. They're streaming the mass today, and we can tell people this, that you help out, if you will, as a retired priest at St. Hugo of the Hills, where Lee Iacocca's funeral mass is being said.
Sure.
I was asking you, you have some connections with Lee Iacocca.
Yes, we go back a while, particularly when I was at Brother Rice, and I was there for many years, as many people know. And we were looking for an honorary chair for a big fundraiser that we were having. And Lee, even though he did not have any sons, he did have two daughters who went to Marion, which was the school next door. And so he felt some sort of a connection with Brother Rice. And I have to admit that he was very kind in accepting our request, if you want, and he said, by all means, you could use my name as the honorary chair. And so with that, we had one of the very first big fundraisers for Brother Rice. I don't even know what the goal was, but in those days, the goal may have been $250,000 or maybe $500,000, and it would have sounded like $1 billion, you know what I mean? Yeah. So it was a matter of having a fundraiser, but you want a name that people can recognize and people can associate with and so on. So I have to admit that he was very, very kind. His wife, Mary, was a very fervent Catholic and was a daily communicant.
She was. She was a daily. Okay.
Daily communicant over at St. Hugo. And I know that, with the Italian, how should I put it, background for both of them, it was very important to him that families stand out and be close to one another and so on. And so that even today, as he's being buried next to Mary, even though after she died, after a while, he lived in California for many years.
Sure he did,
and
yeah.
So, he was brought back for the funeral today. The funeral today was beautifully orchestrated, if you want. It started out with, and I think a lot of people are familiar with the chapel at St. Hugo of the Hills.
Yeah.
A very beautiful structure, reminiscent of a lot of the beautiful churches, Gothic churches in France. It's beautifully put together. It's very conducive to prayer because of its structure, because of the stained glass windows, because of the way the altar is set up, and so on. So there was an hour set aside for private paying of respect to Lee Iacocca. And basically it was just for the family. And
okay.
As a matter of fact, as you probably heard on the news foretelling when the funeral would be, it would always be at 11 o'clock. They did not say anything about 10. But at 10 o'clock, they did have the family going to the chapel. Then there was a formal procession that would go from St. Hugo's Chapel to the main church. And the Mass then began at 11 o'clock at the main church.
I'm going to stop you for one second.
Sure, by all means.
Because the reason why I wanted to stop you was because of the fact that he was very kind to St. Hugo, the new church, St. Hugo the Hills New Church. He provided some financial assistance.
Of course he did, yes.
Do you happen
That was his parish, though. I mean,
yes.
Whenever there's a new church and the parishioners are asked to contribute, there are different levels of contributions. I'm sure he was on the higher end of it.
Yeah. He doesn't have anything specific. He was not there's nothing that you could point out that say Lee Iacocca enabled that particular item or...
Yeah, I think they try to avoid that kind of stuff as much as possible, only because it causes dissension in the ranks, if you want.
I see that now. Sure,
heck,
okay.
what about me? I did all the work.
Right.
I didn't give them the cash, but I worked every day cleaning those,
I see. You're right.
So it's...
So Lee will be buried at Whitechapel Cemetery in Troy,
next to his wife,
in Troy, Michigan, next to his wife. You're right. He did save the automobile industry the first time. I loved his line, "If you can find a better car, buy it."
Buy it.
He was, a lot of people accused him of being more in love with himself than his cars, and I never agreed with that. He was the first industry titan to get out in front of the product and support it, and he believed in it, and he was good at being the spokesperson and the face of Chrysler at that time. And the smartest thing this guy did was to realize the diamond in the rough at AMC, the failed corporation. It was called Jeep. And Jeep now is the hallmark, in my opinion, of FCA. He's an incredible businessman, but as we all have to do, we all have to go meet our maker.
And history tells his, how should I put it? I think while he was alive, people liked to maybe make fun of this and make fun of that and wouldn't give him due credit in many ways and so on. But now that he's gone, people realize what he actually accomplished, as they say, for the car industry, for Detroit. And that was the height of the car industry when his name was very much on top. And so when what he did, for example, saving the pension of people who worked for Chrysler and so on and so forth. And I think there were people who were commenting on that in the newspaper articles that were written recently and so on. So that he certainly accomplished a lot good things. Now, obviously, with my background, I like to think that there's a relationship in the sense that he comes from immigrant parents from Allentown, Pennsylvania, hard-working Italians who really fostered the whole work ethic into his mind so that he put it into practice when he came to work in Detroit. And also because of his attachment to his immigrant family, he certainly was very much instrumental in restoring the Statue of Liberty in New York and so on and so forth.
We're going to get there,
Yeah, so it's...
it meant so much to him.
His history is good.
His history is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And you were talking about the unions, combative, but at the end of the day, great respect for each other.
Definitely.
At the funeral home yesterday, you saw several of the surviving older union representatives saying he could be a tough one. Well, of course. But so could I. Of course. Yeah. Of course. But they eventually agreed to disagree, going back to our podcast arguments. But the Mustang, you cannot overlook what the Mustang did for the automobile industry in total.
No, and one of the nice touches of today's funeral was the lineup of the vintage Mustangs that are in front of the entrance to the church. A whole bunch of them, right in front that people remember him by, actually.
Lee was 94. This had to actually be sort of a joyous occasion.
Well, I look at it this way. When someone lives a successful life, what most people think of as successful, a long life, a relatively healthy life and has accomplished all that Lee Iacocca himself has accomplished, I think you can say that a funeral is really a celebration of his life.
Absolutely.
And so that it takes away the heaviness of the sadness that goes along with it. I'm sure for the family it's very sad, but by the same token, they also have to realize that he lived longer than a lot of other people live today, and he lived a very, how should I put it? For him, he was very successful in all of that, and so that they should be appreciative of all that he accomplished, and so I think it is truly a celebration.
You were saying that she was a regular Mary, his wife, Mary Iacocca. She died how many years ago?
Oh, God, I can't remember.
Really? So she
Many years ago.
So she died relatively young.
Relatively young. It was many years ago.
Many, many years ago. Was he still actively working?
Yes, he was.
I think I remember that now.
Yeah,
I think I remember that. People are fascinated by celebrity funerals, don't you think?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Like in Detroit, we have evidence of that. All of the different entertainers, like Aretha Franklin. And
Absolutely.
So on. The way those things are presented to the public on television and the newspapers and so on seems to continue for months and months and months.
Yeah, you bring up Aretha. She has a music pavilion named after her now. She's now got a part of M10, the Lodge Freeway.
Sure.
The Freeway of Love, Aretha Franklin. Is it interesting to say a celebrity's funeral mass? Is it any different than anyone else?
Of course it's different because the person is so well known that there's probably going to be extra people. And, for example, I think we had a fire chief once die, and I forget who it was, and goes back a while. And, of course, we had the fire trucks parked in front of the church. Like today with Lee Iacocca, you had the vintage Mustangs all lined up in front of the church so that people recognize who did all of that. So, yes, a celebrity funeral, if you want, takes on a different tone because of the numbers of people that are interested who are more than just the parishioners.
Let me ask you this because we noticed this as well today. Why is it that there are, well, first of all, why do you con-celebrate? And number two, how many priests could ultimately be up on an altar for a funeral?
As many as want.
Really?
Oh, sure.
So, in other words, if you're a priest and you were a friend, you would possibly or more than likely be on that altar.
Correct.
Would you each have a position in the saying of that Mass?
No.
No.
You would just con-celebrate.
You would con-celebrate, but you would basically be in attendance.
Correct.
Okay. The pastor...
But it also adds to the grandeur of the church and so on and so forth. Just as the flowers do, and the extra priest, and all of that.
I like that. I think it brings some sort of a religious warmth to the altar.
Sure.
And I think it's a nice thing to do. I will ask you this again, selfishly. How many other priests have you been on the altar with at the same time? Be it for a funeral or a wedding? I stumped him.
No, you didn't. I was the celebrant.
Okay.
We had about 30 priests.
Really?
Yes, but it wasn't there.
You were the celebrant. You had 30 priests. Where was this?
At the Basilica of Notre Dame in South Bend.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Some other time I'll explain.
Really? Oh, come on.
But that was the only thing that...
there were about 30 other priests.
Yeah.
Okay.
We all wore the same vestments.
Uh-huh.
It was very interesting.
Did you wear...
I did not expect this at all.
Uh-huh.
I thought I was going to be the only celebrant.
Uh-huh.
And then you had, like, Monk Malloy, all the presidents of Notre Dame, they joined. Before you know it, they were coming in out of the woodwork, and it was for a very close friend of mine who died rather young. She was very prominent at the university. I happened to know this person before she was born, okay, in the sense that I knew her at birth. And to think that she was so young and died, but she was very prominent at the university, and she's buried right on the grounds of the university.
It's a stunning, stunning church to be in.
Oh, it is. The basilica is beautiful.
I've only been in there once, and it was for a wedding. It was absolutely...
Actually, I did her wedding there, too, but her wedding was years ago, and it was not as didn't have all the number of priests in the concelebration there.
Okay, I have a final question for you. And it's not macabre. I don't mean it like that. But I'm just curious in the number of places, the number of churches that I'm sure you haven't kept count. But how many different churches would you say that you've said either a wedding or a funeral in? Wedding or a funeral, Father Joe Grimaldi, in your 30-some years as a priest, how many different venues, basilicas, churches, wherever the case may be, how many different destinations have you gone or been in?
It's a very hard question to answer because
it isn't that
I lived
hard.
and was in so many different places in the United States.
Okay, you can give me a rough...
In Rome, for example, it would have to be at least 5 or 6. I mean,
so Rome
here would be about 5 at least.
Okay.
Then
so you've done a lot of different
New
churches.
New York would be about 6 or 7. Hawaii then would become almost innumerable because I was there for many years and I would go to all the islands and so on.
Chicago.
Chicago too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Florida.
Florida too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mexico.
No,
Mexico. Okay. One fine. I got to come up with one more. New Mexico.
No.
Wyoming.
No.
Portland.
No.
Seattle.
Yes.
Okay, we'll end with a yes. Did you like it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Nice people.
They're very nice people.
All right.
Okay.
Well, there you go. We covered a lot of territory here on this particular podcast. I hope you enjoyed yourself. How are you feeling, by the way?
I feel great.
Okay, good.
too.
I wanted to put a bow on last week's podcast, by the way. We got a lot of feedback on, do you know the genesis of the name of your church, more or
Oh, I'm
less?
glad. That's great.
A lot of people. I see where you gave them a homework assignment, and I like that, and we're going to have to monitor this now, because you said you wanted them to find out if the altar had relics underneath, if the
Sure.
church had any relics, and were they under the altar, wanted to know which bishop blessed their church, wanted to know more about their patron saint.
Right.
So we'll be getting some feedback, and we'll let you know on that one later.
I looked forward to that. Yeah.
Yeah, but we did get a lot. We certainly got a lot about St. Hugo. So sometime I want you to tell that whole story. Will you do that?
Okay.
It's a good story.
Okay.
All right, and it's been in the paper, so you don't have to worry about breaking any rules here. Okay.
Okay.
I'm Ken Calvert alongside the good Padre, Father Joe Grimaldi, and we'll see you next time on the Father Joe podcast.
Thanks a million, and I look forward to it. This is Father Joe Grimaldi, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Father Joe podcast.
If you'd like, you can email us. It's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. That's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook. Simply search Father Joe Grimaldi. And thanks for listening, everyone.